So does anyone have asthma? Yeah. Sleep apnea? Does anyone know anyone with sleep apnea? Yeah, okay. What about hay fever? Sneezing, itchy eyes, allergies, any of those sorts of things? Yeah, okay. All right. Who snores? No, no one? Okay. Who not sleeps with, but who lays next to someone who snores? Yeah, okay, all right. So this information should be very helpful for all these sorts of conditions. Did I say helpful or hopeful? Actually, both. This is part one of a two-part series on breathing, part of the Body of Knowledge series, and this will cover the theoretical understanding of breathing, how we breathe, why it's important to breathe less, and really a solution for all these sorts of problems. Now, that's the theory. The practical aspect will be part two, coming up next, and that will be the exercises on what to do to correct your breathing. So if you're familiar with anything to do with Buteyko method, Buteyko breathing, then this information may not be new to you. However, this is a little bit of a different take based on our experiences here in the clinic. So any questions as we go through, feel free to interrupt at will. Sorry we're keeping you in the dark just for the purpose of recording, but we'll enlighten you in other areas. Okay, that's the best and the worst joke of the day. Now, let me say at the beginning, this is not medical advice. Don't throw away your Ventolin or your Preventer or your CPAP machine until your doctor thinks it's a good idea, which I'm sure he will. So don't make any changes to your medication or your prescriptions based on this advice. Talk to your doctor first, please. While we're talking about medical related things, unfortunately the current modern medicine approach to the body is that it's really just a mindless machine. It's just a piece of meat that's prone to disease. And it looks at anything that's happening in the body as a result of some external factor, and such as a virus, bacteria, disease, and then subsequently it treats those diseases or conditions with another external intervention. Whereas I prefer to look at the body as a system in equilibrium. It's a semi-closed system that can do amazing things at regulating what's happening inside the body. Now, within that, the symptoms that we exhibit should be seen not as some sort of disease or illness, but actually a response of the body to it being out of equilibrium. So when we're talking about solutions to asthma and sleep apnea and snoring and things like that, we're doing so on this basis, and that is, if we can restore equilibrium in the body, then the symptoms will disappear, i.e. there's no need for the symptoms to be present. So does that sound fair? Okay, good. So if we look at all of these symptoms that we're talking about as ways that the body is trying to restore equilibrium, all of them are a result of too much breathing. Okay, it sounds counterintuitive, I know, that breathing less is actually better for us, but it's true for the following reasons. If you think about it, what happens when we breathe too much? We start to get a bit lightheaded, we start to feel dizzy, and eventually we faint. You know, our brain temporarily switches off, we pass out, because for all the air we're breathing in, we're actually not getting enough oxygen. So if we can understand this, it opens a lot of doors for us. So let's have a look at some elementary science, yeah? So here are our lungs. I think they're red because they're always red in the textbook. And for all intents and purposes, this is the circulatory system that comes from them. As you know, we breathe in oxygen, it's absorbed into our lungs and then put in the bloodstream. And the bloodstream carries the oxygen to the cells that need the oxygen. Okay, simple so far. Now this is where traditionally modern medicine has stopped. It hasn't looked any further. It's measured how much oxygen is in the blood and assumed that if there's enough oxygen in the blood, therefore this person's healthy. Actually, that's not true, because, as in the case of hyperventilation, we pass out because our oxygenation levels, not in our blood but in our brain, have actually dropped to like 35%. So more importantly, we should be measuring how much oxygenation is in the tissue, because this is where the health of the body is determined, not in the bloodstream, but in the cell. And if we were to look at the oxygenation level in the cell, in most people, this would be very, very low. Why? Yeah, good question. You see, we've known for a long time that 95% of disease is stress-related. And the symptoms we're talking about, asthma, sleep apnea, hay fever, snoring, those sorts of things, are a result of a habitual over-breathing. It's like our body is living in a war zone. It's in a stress state all the time. Does that answer your question? Yeah, good. Getting back to our diagram, right throughout the body are the trillions of cells that need to absorb the oxygen coming out of the bloodstream. However, in order to absorb oxygen, these cells need to exchange one molecule of carbon dioxide for a molecule of oxygen. For the oxygen to be absorbed into the cell, there must be a carbon dioxide molecule leave the cell. With me so far? Good. So inside each of these cells, there must be a reserve of carbon dioxide such that as oxygen comes from the bloodstream, then carbon dioxide can be released back into the bloodstream, flow through the circulatory system back to the heart, and the process continues. Sorry, back to the lungs rather. One way to think about it is a game of musical chairs. I'm sure we've all played that game. Imagine that the oxygen molecules are the people playing the game and the carbon dioxide are the chairs. So if there are not enough chairs, what happens? Some of the people are left standing. If there's not enough chairs inside the cell for the oxygen to be absorbed, then the oxygen just has to keep going around and around in the circulatory system. Another way to think about it is like a subway train. If you get on the train at peak hour tonight and you ride the train back to your station, however, when you get to your station, the platform is so crowded that you cannot get off the train. Now, if there's someone on that platform wanting to get onto your train, then you can get off. That person getting on the train has just made space for you to get off the train and get to where you want to go. However, if the platform is crowded and there's no one there who's getting on your train, what happens? You have to stay on the train and ride it to the next stop and walk back or whatever you do. So the same thing happens in our body. If there's not enough carbon dioxide in the cell to be released and exchanged for the oxygen, then the oxygen just has to keep going around and around the circulatory system. So what's the solution? Breathe less. Because as you know, the carbon dioxide that is so vital for our body was once oxygen. As the oxygen is absorbed, it's converted into carbon dioxide. So breathing less allows more time for that oxygen to be converted into carbon dioxide, and then as the next wave of oxygen comes in, then that carbon dioxide can be released. However, if we're breathing too quickly or too shallowly, we are not giving the body time to convert the oxygen. So it's got more oxygen than carbon dioxide and we get out of balance. Interestingly, all the symptoms we're talking about, asthma, sleep apnea, things like that, allergies, that's the body's natural attempt to slow our breathing down. It first of all, it fills our sinuses with mucus to prevent us breathing so much. Or then if that doesn't work, then our throat starts to close over And then if that doesn't work, as in the case of sleep apnea, at night it just has to stop breathing momentarily. Now, as unpleasant as all these symptoms are, they're actually our body's wisdom trying to help us, trying to save our life. What do we do instead? We just put a wedge in our mouth to open our mouth up, or breathe in steroids to open up our throat, or we just get a pump, CPAP machine, and force air down in our throat. So as you can see, these solutions are actually working counter to what nature would want us to do. So without enough carbon dioxide, three things happen. One, we can't absorb oxygen, which we've said. Two, without carbon dioxide, our muscles, our tissue, particularly our smooth muscles, go into spasm. Our throat starts to close over. All of our cells actually literally contract. And the third thing is that as a result of the first two, the fluid system is upset. As the tissue contracts, it squeezes all the fluid out, the extracellular matrix, and upsets electrolytes and minerals and all those sorts of things. So we need carbon dioxide to open up the cell again so that it can reabsorb that fluid. We need carbon dioxide so that the muscles can relax, and of course carbon dioxide so that our cells can absorb oxygen. Make sense? So the question is, can we breathe too little? Good question. Interestingly, oxygen is in abundance all around us. Carbon dioxide, however, is not. There's only about 0.3% carbon dioxide in the air, and our lungs actually prefer about 6.5% oxygen. So that alone would determine that it's very unlikely for as much carbon dioxide as you could accumulate in your body. For as long as you're breathing, there is ample oxygen out there to counteract that. Yeah, does that make sense? So really all we're doing is reversing the effects of stress. By breathing less, we're relaxing our body to its natural state. Now, can you go more relaxed than relaxed? Hypothetically, maybe, but in practice, very unlikely. Yeah.